All right, I have no idea what the NBA refereeing controversy is, so I'm going to lead in with the Tim Peel part, and then we can get into the big conversation, and then I'll just learn it from you guys. Cool? Hello, welcome to Hat Trick. My name is Jordan Dallar-Coltman. I am joined, as always, by my brother Braydon Dallar-Coltman. We have a very special third wheel this week because we're going to talk about a very special off-topic, something we haven't talked about yet this season. KRISTIAN STEC is our guest. Welcome, KRISTIAN. How are you? And welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jordan. I'm doing well.
This is going to be fun. Like I said off the top, we're going to talk about something a little bit different. This is going to be an all basketball edition of Hat Trick. We are going to sprinkle just a little bit of hockey into the third topic because it's sort of a bigger sport-wide,
almost basketball.
Yeah, almost completely basketball. We'll get a little bit of other sports in there because our third topic is going to get into something that's a little more sports in general, but that's okay. The first two topics are 100% hardcourt basketball hoops, both professional and, as they like to call, amateurism in the NCAA. We'll talk about both of those. Let's get right to it. But Braydon, before we do that, we launched our brand new podcast on this feed. Are you excited for the race that's about to take place? This podcast will be out after it, so it's kind of before that.
I'm very excited. And you reminded me that the race is a little bit later, which means that I have
make sure you set that PVR correctly. You're going to miss it. Do you want to just do a real quick plug here in the intro for our other show?
Yes, check out the Pit Stop podcast presented by Hat Trick Sports and the Ordinary Podcasting Network. You can find it in the feed for Hat Trick Sports. We're talking everything F1, including how terrifying Lawrence Stroll is.
Braydon is absolutely petrified of Lawrence Stroll. All right,
that's great. Let's get to see a picture of this guy. He looks like a Bond villain. There's no other way about it.
He now owns the Aston Martin brand, which is even better. All right, let's get to it. Here's Hat Trick for this week. Okay, topic one this week. Because I have KRISTIAN on the show, because Braydon himself is an admitted diehard basketball fan, we wanted to spend some time talking about basketball. We're going to start professionally. We're going to start in the NBA. We're just past the trade deadline. We finished their ridiculous All-Star weekend. We're into the home stretch here as the NBA turns its corner towards the playoffs and teams start to figure out whether or not they have what it takes to compete this year. So we're just going to sort of talk about the season in general, but I wanted to start off. The trade deadline came and went. Kyle Lowry stayed. KRISTIAN, maybe what were your first impressions of what the Raptors did and did not do at the trade deadline? We'll start there.
Well, it's not necessarily about what they did or didn't do. More so, I feel like what they were capable of. Kyle Lowry's contract, I don't know what's given this year, somewhere around the $30 million. It was a lot of money to move. And I think that honestly, we kept talking a lot. Oh, he's going to go to Philly. Oh, maybe he's going to Miami. Now the Lakers are in talks. Maybe he could swing there. But when you looked at each respective team, and I know that what Toronto wanted at the end of the day, which was at least a decent enough return, that's always an issue when you're moving a star player. You know, you move $1 for 4 quarters. It never really adds up. And Kyle Lowry, he's 35 now. He's still bringing it, which is great. And he's done a lot for the Raptors, franchise. But when you think about the future moving ahead, it's really important to get assets and get them while the opportunity is there. And it's just unfortunate, but I don't think you can really blame Toronto because, like I said, their options are really limited. Philly was probably the most eager that would have swung a deal. And then when George Hill became available, that just shut the door right away. I mean, Braydon pretty much sent me a message as soon as George Hill was announced that he was going to Philly. It's like, all right, well, I guess we're out.
Well, the Lakers would seem like the ones that really wanted Lowry too, but they just don't have any assets. There's nothing that they could do to make that trade happen.
Like Horton Tucker, is that the best that you're going to get?
I mean,
yeah.
Kuzma, I don't know.
So the Raptors did make one deal, one big deal, I should say. They made a couple smaller deals, a couple guys in and out, but really the Norm Powell one was the headliner. He goes to Portland. He has a chance to at least compete a little bit there with Dame Lillard. Any other big headlines for you, Braydon, coming out of the trade deadline when you just look league wide? Teams that got a lot better or teams that just didn't do enough?
Well, I'd say Denver Nuggets got a lot better there, adding Aaron Gordon to their front court. I'm a little bit disappointed in KRISTIAN's pride which is the Boston Celtics and what they did.
What, signing Evan Fournier?
What does that do? How does that?
Well, it's going to help their shooting a little bit. But, this is a big issue right now, is especially so we had two guys, LaMarcus Aldridge and Andre Drummond, big men, power forward, centers, however you want to look at it. And this is a big desire in the market right now. Every team, or probably like at least 80% of the league, could use a big guy like that, the power forward position, number 4. Everybody wants it. And, it's just, my Celtics are not doing any better than the Raptors right now, to be quite frank with you.
No.
But yeah, Denver's really good.
I think the Norman Powell trade really improved what Portland's got going there.
Absolutely. Third option for kind of consistent shooting. Yeah. They needed playmakers other than Lillard and McCollum. And yeah, I mean, they got a lot more depth. The West is like very competitive. So it helps their chances.
But all that to say, the Brooklyn Nets added who they added? Marcus Aldridge in the buyout market. They're looking like a 2K All-Star team right now.
And they traded for Blake Griffin. They didn't trade for Blake Griffin. They just got him.
Yeah, they just got him.
They really are the team, though, aren't they? If you were putting money down today, they look like the favorites, right?
If you live in Brooklyn, they're the favorites. If you live anywhere else and cheer for any other team in the NBA, you are hoping that this team falls out in the first round, because it's
not going to happen.
Well, I know, but you've got to look at the way in which these the contracts go, the way in which teams are built. This is kind of ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, and it also feels a little bit like, I don't know, some of these players have been kind of scorned, and it's almost like a big middle finger. I feel like a lot of ways this Brooklyn team, looking at the rest of the league, a lot of these guys, they've been outcasts. You look at Harden, in his tenure at Houston. You look at Blake Griffin. He signs a contract extension. He gets kicked out of the Clippers, goes to Detroit. DeAndre Jordan, in the Clippers too, that tenure didn't go well. Kevin Durant never felt like he got his just desserts after he won his championships. Kyrie Irving feels like he's kind of rejected from, the rest of the NBA right now, and especially the media. Like, all these guys, I feel like they've got, a point to prove. But it's just unfortunate. Like, Stephen A said it perfectly. I saw this tonight, and he made the claim, is like, what? Like, are you guys just going to buy the championship?
That's just it, right? 3 guys go to Miami, LeBron, Bosh, and Wade, and everyone freaks out. Like, this is, oh my God, this is it. This
hated that team too. And this is just like on a, steroids.
Hate's a strong word.
I was in Miami. I was in Florida during those times. I saw those guys wearing those Miami Heat jerseys, and I was not too happy about it. Let's just say that.
Oh boy.
All right, we'll leave it there. That's topic 1. Topic 2 this week is brought to us by Busy Bee Vegan. Are you feeling hungry? Busy Bee Vegan is a plant-based meal prep service offering pre-made, delicious, and healthy plant-based meals to the Greater Toronto area. Whether you're curious about plant-based vegan eating, looking to improve your overall health and wellness, or simply too busy to cook, Busy Bee is for you. Their plans are focused on eating clean without sacrificing taste and contributing to a healthy planet. They have made it super simple. Choose and order your meals from the multiple plans they offer, and they will deliver your meals in environmentally friendly compostable containers right to your door. You can find them on Instagram at Busy Bee Vegan Meals or on Facebook at Busy Bee Vegan. Go check out a small local business in Toronto and save the hassle of COVID grocery shopping and cooking. Let the Busy Bees feed you buzz-worthy meals. Okay, topic 2 this week. We're going to stick with basketball. We're going to move to the NCAA tournament, March Madness, and a weird tournament this year because we didn't have a tournament last year due to COVID. So there was a lot of attention given and a lot of excitement around this year's return. But I think we could all probably agree it's been a weird tournament. COVID and probably a big factor in that. We'll get into that a little bit, but maybe we'll just start off with this, and it's really this simple. Hey, Christian, how busted is your bracket?
It's so busted, man. So busted. I will say I have Gonzaga going to win it all. I think a lot of people picked this, and for good reason. Gonzaga went 26-0 in the regular season. They've got, I couldn't name off the top of my head, but I bet you there's about 6 players there, that are incredibly elite. They've been around together for a long time. I think there's Suggs, and I think another maybe 2 guys that are potentially going to be in the NBA. So there's a lot of promise there. But I mean, you look at these 15 seeded teams, 12 seeded. We just saw today Oregon State ended up making it to the Elite Eight with their win over who'd they?
Over Loyola.
Loyola.
My Cinderella story that came crashing into an end.
Which is crazy. Loyola comes in as an 8th seed or whatever in their particular bracket. And when you looked at the KenPom stats, they were like rated in the top 10 in the whole entire, team is 64. So even how this bracket kind of got arranged was a little bit, and I mean, the NCAA is always like that. It's not very consistent.
Well, you got to land somewhere, right?
Yeah, that's true.
In the standings.
But I gotta say, so this was my thought that I had recently when I'm looking at this, and I should have thought this in hindsight when I picked my bracket, is that because we didn't have any fans, like I know, typically when this tournament happens, there's like regional sections when it starts. I've been to Indianapolis and I've seen it when you talk about Purdue, Butler, all of these teams, like they're not too far away from each other. And when they do these regional tournaments, like the school comes, the band comes, the students that are there, they're screaming off the top of their lungs. And we didn't have any of that.
Madness.
Exactly. And it makes me think like in a way that, some of these teams, Oral Roberts, a clear example of this, 15 seeded team, it's a very small school, kind of excluded from, the whole hysteria of basketball and March Madness in general. And they made such a deep run. Unfortunately, they lost tonight. But you think a team like that in a given year in March Madness, you may not see, or at least as many teams like that make it as far in the tournament. And I think because of COVID and not having those fans there, it kind of evens out the playing field a little bit.
The funniest thing I saw when I was trying to see like what's changed, what's different in the way that they're doing this, because I think they do have a certain percentage maybe of fans up in the top crowd, or maybe not at all, I don't know, but they've spread out the bench. I don't know if you've seen this, Jordan, but when the guys come off, say like a guy, one of their best players has played a good 20 minutes and he comes off and his seat is like 10 rows up. He's got to walk all the way up just to sit down.
Yeah, I can't remember what city that is, but yeah, it's the one arena there. You have to sit all the way up in the stands. It's just,
it looks hilarious.
I think one of the other interesting storylines that came out of this year's tournament was another great example of the inequity between the women's and men's tournament. I'm sure we all saw those tweets and the TikTok videos that some of the women and reporters were reporting from the women's tournament, the women's side of the tournament, where they had like what they called the fitness center, and it was like a yoga mat and some dumbbells. And you contrast that to the men's side of the tournament, which has always been, like very unevenly supported. And of course, 3 days later, the NCAA had instantly found enough equipment to fill the women's room. But, the original argument they made was, well, there wasn't enough space for more equipment. Well, there seems to be enough space now that you've been called out for it. But it just, every single year space. This tournament comes up, it really continues to demonstrate the flaws in the NCAA system, I think, and the idea that, we have these, again, amateur, quote unquote, athletes, as they like to brand them, who are in many cases, these people who have athletes who have come from situations where they have no family resources and support financially while they're going to school. All they have is the basketball program, and how many of them are actually ever going to make it out of there to be professional NBA or WNBA players. And yet the money that is spent on this tournament, both by people who watch it and support it, but also just like the sponsorship amount of money that the NCAA and those schools are profiting off of these unpaid athletes back, is just, again, it's always a storyline. So it is kind of cool too, like you said, this year, to see some of the smaller schools getting the attention. It would just be nice if those smaller schools were given the opportunity to have their athletes treated the way everybody else was. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, of course. And you hit pretty much on all the right points about the NCAA. It's a constant reminder of the inequities that go on. And And you're exactly right, the profitability on it. I mean, and it's so transparent. Like, we know the millions of dollars that they're making, and how much issue it was last year when they had to cancel March Madness. I mean, there was conversations that were happening all the time. So
well, and I think the other interesting piece, just to finish this up about that, is what's nice is that the athletes, I think, more and more are becoming empowered to speak up and to fight for this in a way that a decade ago we just weren't seeing. They were so muzzled and so sort of stamped down with the fear of losing their scholarships and all those things. But I think the way social media, TikTok, Instagram, the ability for these women in this case to like basically just put this evidence out there for the world and hold the NCAA accountable to sort of like social justice in a way that wasn't there a decade ago has really empowered the athletes to stand up for themselves. And I think that's where the change can come from. And so then eventually we can get back to this tournament being just about the basketball, which is what the NCAA wants. But the basketball has to be right now the catalyst, like like all sports are. It's just another great example of that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
So just quickly before we do end, who was your pick in who's going to win this tournament, Jordan?
I have Gonzaga as well, but I always have Gonzaga. Yeah. Pretty much every year I put them down there because it's like the only NCAA team for whom I have apparel is Gonzaga. Therefore, I cheer for them, and that's my team every year.
That's me with the Oilers.
And a lot of Canadians go through Gonzaga too, right? So about Canada.
If they win, I look like a lifelong fan because I have the hat. If they lose, I can always just wear a different hat. So. All right, topic 3 this week is the one that I teased off the top, is a little bit of a cross-sport conversation, because what we want to talk about is referees. And there are referees in basketball, there's referees in hockey, there's referees in football, there's umpires in baseball, there's line judges in tennis. I guess they're called umpires too, actually, chair umpires. Anyway, point being, there's officials in all major sports because somebody has to manage the game, right? Somebody has to call the penalties or the fouls or whatever, call strikes and balls. Somebody has to be the outsider, not affiliated with either team, only affiliated through the league, but with no self-interest, only worrying about the presence of what the game is. That's the idyllic idea of what a referee, official, or umpire is supposed to be. Well, unfortunately, this week we had an unfortunate incident in the NHL that has brought into bigger conversations about officiating, refereeing, game management. I'm obviously talking right now about Tim Peel, the longtime veteran referee in the NHL who was caught on a hot mic at a Nashville Predators game. His mic was live on the broadcast as they went to commercial. He had some colorful language, but the gist of what he said was that he had tried to just call a penalty, and he had intended to call that penalty because he wanted to get a penalty against Nashville early in the game to set the tone. This is the kind of thing that as fans, we have always complained about, suggesting that it's happening, but never had this blatant, clear evidence of the fact that it's there. Now, this is a very big and complicated conversation because we have to remember referees are human beings. They are fallible. We know full well about evidence of, referees being caught up in bribery and cheating scandals. There was an NBA referee recently who was fired after they found out he was part of a betting ring trying to fix games. This isn't new to sports, but it's new to the conversation or sort of back in the conversation. So I thought we'd start with that. What were your first thoughts, Braydon, when you heard about the Tim Peel thing? Maybe heard that he'd had this hot mic and then subsequently been fired.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, this is the first time that I think we have been able to, I mean, it's funny. We talked a little while ago about the CFL and how much there was an issue with bringing mics into the game. And, the fact that this is now part of the game, that Tim Peel's been in the league for a very long time. So, it's we can't assume that this hasn't happened before, but the truth is, like, this can't happen. This is the issue when it comes to officiating, and the trouble is, we're starting to see officiating taking over the game and deciding things that we were both referees growing up in minor hockey. The main thing they teach you is you can't call something you don't see. So the whole notion that that there's makeup calls or they're trying to set the tone, that's terrible. It's terrible for the game that's in there, and that's in there at the highest level, I think, is even worse.
Yeah, it's it's unfortunate, but not surprising. I think, like you made that point, Jordan, a lot of us, either as fans fear that conversation all the time of manipulation. And, it goes into that conversation too with like technology and technology having that sharper accountability with, various different cameras on, confirming whether or not those penalties happened or not. And it's tricky though. I think it's a bit of a fine line. And I may use this as a bit of a segue where I talk about with the NBA, it's the referee's job. It's about trying to make the best calls they possibly can, the right call, but not dictating that call that could turn out the result of the game per se. You really don't want to happen. It's a horrible feeling as a fan, especially like the team that you're rooting for, when the game ends and the causation of whoever say won that game was based on a ref call. I mean, you see this in basketball all the time, and it's really frustrating. But the point I wanted to segue to was that I think it's a fine line between, there is human error and the refs trying to get the play right, but also keeping a certain fluidity. And I know it's a little bit easier in hockey, kind of once the puck drops. But in basketball, this is a really apparent issue the last 5 minutes of the game. Like I could tell you, Jordan, about 2 weeks ago, I think I watched, it was a Pelicans game. It might've been against the Raptors. I'm not sure. But literally that last 5 minutes of the game probably took at least a half hour, maybe 45 minutes. And that's insane. Like, how are you get so much hype in any sport when it's like the last 5 minutes of the game. And I don't know, in hockey, you're down by a goal and you like pull your goalie and there's all of this pressure. And then it's like every like 12 seconds, we're going to stop the play because we have to review something.
Yeah.
Or, there's a huge moment in a game and then you instead have to sit and wait like 10 minutes. So you're checking in with like that front office to make sure you got the play right. I don't know. I've heard a lot of different podcasters, a lot of different sportcasters in various different sports. And this has been something that's prevalent in various different sports right now. And
well, it's interesting. It's interesting because I think that both of you touched on a couple things that I think go both ways. The challenge is we all kind of knew this was happening. Like it's kind of obvious that there's instances of the referees trying to manage the game, as I said. That's sort of the kosher way of saying makeup calls and calling balanced and even fair, but also about like trying to keep the game moving forward. I remember listening to an interview with a retired NFL referee, and he was talking about how he's like, if I called at every penalty I saw, the game would be 7 hours long, because on every single play there's pass interference. On every single play there's holding by the line. Every single play there's a penalty. The truth is they have to make judgment calls based on the egregiousness of the penalty. And that's the unfortunate part, is we've put these, again, human beings in a position to fail, because one or the other side is going to love or hate every decision they make, right? There's no penalty that you ever have called against your team that you're happy is called. Some penalties you can see, yep, clearly he just slapped the guy in the face. That's a penalty. There's certain plays though where it hurts your team and you get frustrated. So I think the difficulty is, as long as we have human beings doing these jobs, even with the aid of technology, which is definitely a bigger problem right now, I think, in basketball than in hockey, because they're not allowing every single penalty to be reviewed in hockey, right? The only penalty that gets reviewed is goaltender interference, which is, again, a bit more complicated play. But if there's a trip called or a high stick called or a cross check called, it's the referee's word. That's the end of the conversation. Players may argue, referees and coaches may get into arguments, but that's the end of the discussion. But it's definitely different when you do add that the camera tells a very different story when you slow the play down and you watch it in slow motion. The truth is, these referees see it in real time from angles the cameras are not on the ice or on the court, and they make, I think we have to give them the benefit of the doubt. They make the best judgment calls they can most of the time. This Tim
but if
Peel
that's
thing,
the case,
Tim Peel thing is unfortunate, because it does show that they make, they are admitting that the dirty little secret we all kind of knew was true is present. The question is just how much, how present is it? And then we have to decide how much we're willing to live with that, I guess, is where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, with the technology coming into it, like it still feels like we haven't figured it out. Is it the ref's call, or is, if the ball went off of a guy's hand, the ref said it was that, it's going this direction. Why are we going back to the prompter to make sure that we've got that right? If the official's making that call, that's, then let's do that. And if not, then do we need, in-person officials, or are we just going to go with it's a much bigger conversation, I think. And each sport is trying to figure that out.
And let me just say,
every sport is different, right?
Yeah, totally. And it'd be an interesting argument to see, maybe within the next 5 to 10 years, I'm not sure how long, but when I think about word sport, baseball in particular, and umpires, there's been so much conversations of, we have the camera technology available. Yeah. We could just use that. And the umpire sitting behind the plate could be, extinct, at that point. And then if that happens, the other sports in comparison to baseball and seeing the legitimacy, okay, we're going to go fully AI in terms of monitoring this game to show the truth and if the game is being done fairly and whatever the result of that game is. Now, if they do that, and after a couple seasons, the NHL, the NBA, the NFL starts to look at that, and what kind of conversations are we having then?
I think I know we're over time, but I think what's true is, you're right. Then it becomes very sport specific, because in baseball, a strike is a strike based on very strict guidelines of where the ball is thrown, based on the height and size of where the batter is standing, right? The strike zone doesn't, it's scientifically sound. The struggle here is that in all these other sports, especially something like hockey or even basketball, where you have that many people in that small a space, and fouls or penalties are taken at very fast and complicated speeds with bodies in the way and all these different things, there has to be judgment calls about what is just sort of part of the play, whose hand it was. How many times have we even seen real human being referees call high sticking when the guy's own stick came up and hit him because the two sticks went up at the same time, right? That's the foul. But you're telling me a computer is going to be able to identify that? Or we then get into the opposite side of it where every single foul is called. And honestly, if we want to get to a place where every single penalty that's taken is called, it's going to so degrade the quality and the speed and the fluidity of all of the favorite sports we have, that I think we could
wants to watch that.
We'd be doing.
I think that's what we're talking about with basketball, is that is what's now happening, is that even though we have these refs, the game at the end, like the last 30 seconds of a game, ends up being 30 minutes just to figure out. It kills all momentum. It kills.
Let's go to another commercial.
Who wants to watch that? Who wants to watch that? Right? Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thank you, Kristian, for joining us. I really appreciate it. We're going to have you back for some more basketball talk soon as we get closer to the playoffs. But thanks for being our third wheel this week.
That sounds great, Jordan. Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for the great conversations. Fun topics today.
All right, thanks for listening. This has been Hat-Trick.
That's Hat-Trick.
There you go. That's good. That's what I usually say.
That's what you usually say. That's Hat-Trick.
Hat-Trick is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. It's produced every week by Jordan Dowler-Coltman and Braydon Dowler-Coltman. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.